You're listening to Coach Mike on the mic. Let's talk hoops. A podcast that brings hoop fans together and their stories to life. Coach Michael Herrera is a Texas high school basketball coach with 3 state Final Four appearances and a lifelong fan of the game. He'll sit down with coaches, players, and fans to share stories, game perspectives, X's and O's, and lessons learned along the way. Now, let's talk hoops.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So welcome to Coach Mike on the mic. Let's talk hoops. I'm sitting down with Coach Mark Horner out of Ohio. Coach, I appreciate you taking the time this morning to visit with me, man.
I am honored to be on here. And you know what? When you called and when you shot me a message and asked, man, I'm more than honored. I'm excited.
You know, it's crazy. It's crazy how we met, right? Like, we have never physically met in person, but through a men in education group that we're a part of on Facebook is how we met. And this is precisely why I like doing this podcast, because you get to meet new people. You get to connect to other coaches outside of the state that you're currently in. And when else would we ever have the opportunity to talk like this? First of all, not even knowing each other, but feel like we know each other through, social media, that we can sit and have a face-to-face conversation about basketball. So it's a interesting dynamic for those of you listening to this podcast. Mark and I have never met in person, but we've met through social media, through an educational group. So again, Mark, thanks for joining me, man.
Hey, it's the silver lining of the quarantine, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because, I remember before the quarantine, people talk about, Zoom, or I hated FaceTime, hated any of those other, type of audio, video connectors. But now it's like second nature. And that quarantine forced all of us to get comfortable really fast with this type of communication. And now I don't think we're ever going back. Heck, our parent-teacher conferences and our parent meetings for all of our sports, I was talking to our head coach on Friday. Everything's going to be done on we use Google Meet, but we're going to Zoom meet everybody. It's just the way of the world now. It's crazy.
It's a new norm, and my outlook on things like this is always look at the positive. Obviously COVID is not good. I don't think anybody enjoys this right now, but the good that comes out of it, is certainly going to have its benefits. And you look at events like 9/11, right? My aunt was tragically killed in the Trade Center when that happened. But on the flip side of that, our security measures and tactics and protocols, it's an unfortunate event, but on the flip side, you've got to look at what came out of it positive. Mm-hmm. And I think COVID is like you said, it's forcing, and since we're talking hoops here, it's forcing coaches to think of other ways to elevate their game, right? To raise their game. And I feel like Zooming is one of those perfect ways, and podcast is a way for me to connect outside of my own state.
Yeah,
I'm very comfortable going to clinics and stuff and seeing the same coaches and talking hoops, but Texas might be a different way of playing basketball than you do in Ohio. And so if I can learn from you and learn from other coaches, hey, let's go, And
now it's time for Layup Lines.
So the first part of my podcast, I like to call layup lines. So, you're a basketball coach, right? You've got both basketball teams, one in red, one in black, one in white, one in green. Both sides are kind of checking each other out, getting loose, getting warm. So I like to just start by asking 5 quick questions just to kind of get to know you better, but also to allow the audience to know you a little bit better too. So you ready to warm up?
Oh, absolutely. Ready to go.
All right, man. Question number 1 for you. If you could go back in time and high-five yourself for something that you did, what would you go back and high-five yourself for?
Ooh, it's a good one. So what would I high-five myself for doing? Well, you want something basketball-related, or you want something life-related?
Whatever you want, man, life or basketball.
Okay, well, I'll start. There's a couple of them that are kind of running through my head, but I'll tell you what. I would high-five myself for having the courage to actually call out my wife's name when she walked by to get her attention to meet her, because I can still remember the fear and trepidation I felt when I saw her walk by. She played volleyball at the University of Akron, and I was there to watch a game because I played some volleyball as well. And I was kind of attracted to her, and I wanted to, thought maybe I'd reach out to her. But I remember when she walked by, there's no way I have the courage to do this, and then I just did it. So I would give myself a high five for that. I would give myself a high five for competing. When I was a freshman, I was telling some of my players in the hallway this story the other day about a situation, my first time on the varsity court as a freshman. And there was this kid, he was probably about 6'7". At the time, he seemed like he was 6'10" and was like a brick house, and I'm a 6-foot freshman coming out on the court, and there was a loose ball. And I remember making the conscious choice, I'm going in for that 50-50 ball, and I'm going to win it no matter what. And I went in after it. And I would give myself a high five for the courage to do that. But then I was also slightly embarrassed because the whistle had already blown and he had been called for a travel. So he was just sitting there kind of on his knees with the ball. But I was so zoned in, I was ready to do it. But that kind of broke the ice for me on the court. And it was a little humiliating, but it was fun. But yeah, that's a great question.
I always like it. It's not the best coaches are thieves, right?
Yeah.
So, a lot of these stuff, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I just thought that was such an excellent question. It's actually a teacher podcast that I follow. Hopefully he's listening because he knows I got it from him. But there's actually some other questions too that'll come along with that that I'll have for you during halftime. But man, when you just spoke right there, man, I'm not gonna lie. I wish you could see the hair on my arms rise when you talked about your wife, man. Mark, you and I have a lot in common, man. So true story. My wife also played college volleyball at Texas Tech.
Okay.
And that's how my wife and I met too. I saw her in the weight room wearing a Texas Tech volleyball shirt, and I was like, man, do I talk to her? Do I not talk to her? And so so crazy story, man. That's how my wife and I met too, man. I had the courage just like you to go bold enough and go talk to her. So
that's awesome.
We dated 6 months and then we got engaged 6 months later and married 6 months after that. So
oh wow.
It was awesome. But
we didn't move that fast. We actually dated 6 years.
Okay.
And then got married, but we've been married 21 years now. So
we're going on 16, man. So
nice.
We've got something in common there.
Yeah.
All right. Number 2, favorite basketball player growing up that you wanted to be like?
Oh man. So a lot of it. So there are quite a few, and it would probably depend on the skill that they were known for. But I would tell you probably the most influential player and would be Patrick Ewing. I was a rebounder. That was my primary role in basketball. I was blessed at the time with some really good, good jumping ability. I mean, I could get up there. I was super competitive. I like to tangle. I like to get in there and mix it up. And then we always had like really good scores. So I knew that, my action was going to come from cleaning up all the, the junk. And so I would just watch. I loved Patrick Ewing when he was at Georgetown and then in the NBA. I had Patrick Ewing like the old Sports Illustrated posters, Patrick Ewing all over the place. And every Sports Illustrated magazine cover that he was on, everywhere, all around my bedroom. And him and Charles Barkley, I would just watch them whenever I could. If we would have had YouTube back then, I would have just had YouTube clips nonstop going of those guys just rebounding and studying their technique and all that. But yeah, Patrick Ewing for sure.
All right. Question number 3. So I don't know if this is going to be your answer, but favorite college basketball team and NBA team?
Well, my favorite college team is Duke. I'm a big Coach K fan. Some of my buddies are going to listen to this and it's going to, they're going to get a little angry. There's a lot of Duke hatred around here, but I love Coach K. I love his philosophy. I love the way he works with his kids. I've read a ton of books about Coach K and from Coach K. I just really, I like watching Duke. Good fundamental basketball. They box out like crazy. They prioritize rebounding. They run a great motion offense. So I love watching Duke. NBA, man, I got to go with my Cavs. I'm a diehard. I love the Cavs, even in the midst of this, what seems to be an eternal storm since LeBron left us. We're terrible, but I do support the Cavaliers. someday we'll have another team that'll be worth supporting. But yeah, I don't watch a lot of NBA, to be honest with you. I think Will talked about this on one of your one of your podcasts that you opened. You know, the NBA is entertainment, and the NCAA is basketball. And so I watch any level of college basketball. If it's on, I'll flip it on and just watch because and I think you may have mentioned this as well, but if not, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's always something you can draw and you can use. And even at my level, coaching 8th grade, I mean, I can pull up a play, a set, an inbounding play, and use it. So
absolutely, man. I don't care who's on TV in college basketball. If it's a college game, I'm watching it because there's going to be a play or something that I can steal from them. But I tell you what, you know, with COVID, it's like there's basketball on TV now. I've watched more NBA basketball during this COVID time than I honestly probably have watched in the last probably 2 or 3 years combined. I don't watch a lot of NBA basketball. If I do, it's the Spurs, and I really don't start watching NBA basketball until the playoffs anyway. But I totally agree with you, man. All right, so question number 4. Hopefully you can answer this question. The biggest celebrity that you have ever met, and how'd y'all meet? Like, how did y'all cross paths?
The biggest celebrity. Well, I've met LeBron. And
Talk
actually,
about it. How'd that happen?
Well, actually, I was sitting on the bench at an area school. I was a varsity assistant and a JV coach, varsity assistant, and we actually played him against St. V when he was a sophomore. Then I was sitting on the bench here at Tallmadge. I'm trying to remember. I was on the bench against him his junior year and on the bench against him his senior year. His senior year is probably the most memorable moment because we actually made it to the regional semifinal, and it was held at the University of Toledo. And LeBron and by that point, you know, St. V was just this powerhouse and the talk of everybody. And so it was really interesting. They had their locker room, we had ours, but there was a huge curtain, all kinds of security. I mean, you weren't even allowed to look at St. V at that point until they were on the court. But you know, ran into LeBron countless times on the basketball circuit. He's a big supporter. I mean, we're right outside. We're literally a suburb of Akron.
Okay.
And so we see LeBron. A lot of people that work for LeBron, their spouses work here or coach here. Or we have former students that work for the LeBron James Foundation. He does just a ton for all of Summit County, honestly. And so he's got a pretty strong presence. So he's around here. But coaching against him was pretty interesting. You're sitting on the bench and watching him play and watching him grow as a player was just a once in a lifetime experience.
Man, so I mean, obviously I didn't know that. So let's kind of just break away from my last question for a second and let's go there. Like, what was that like watching him in high school? Like, what was he just leaps and bounds, like way ahead of everybody else? Talk a little bit about seeing him play.
So the first time when we played against him, his cousin Maverick Carter was actually the kind of the focal point of the team. And so LeBron had a secondary role, but I mean, I think at that point he was double figures and points and rebounds at the time. He had this amazing ability to just turn it on whenever he wanted. And that was a lot of the games that I would go and watch, like at the University of Akron. St. V moved to that facility to play their games because they're bringing in, you know, DeMatha, they're bringing in all these other like huge high schools to play against them, or the biggest schools in Northeast Ohio would come down and play. And so that they would just sell out the Jar Arena. It's kind of sad when a high school game is getting more people than your college team, you know, it's drawing more people. But we'd go watch, and LeBron would kind of lay off at first and let everybody get going. And then when most needed, then he would turn it on and then he would take a game over. He did that against our team in the regional semifinals. We always joke around. I think we went up like 8-0 in the first quarter, and LeBron hadn't done anything. And all of a sudden we almost felt like he looked over at the bench, looked at us, and then he pulls up for it, an NBA range three. He drains it. And then from that point on, I think we got smoked by 40 points. I don't remember. And I think a couple of those dunks made it on ESPN that he had against us. I mean, it was just sitting there watching. I mean, our head coach, we all just sat there and like, let's just enjoy it, you know, because not a lot of people get a front row seat to this kind of a performance. But it was amazing watching him every year get better and better, stronger. I will be honest with you. I wasn't sure I agreed with his decision to go into the NBA. I thought that he should go into college, because there's no way you're going to be able to go into the NBA as a 19-year-old kid and have a huge impact. But who knows? I don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's been unbelievable.
That's awesome, man. That's such a great story, man.
Well, then his kids, his kids played around here and did a lot of AAU here, and played they went to Copley, which is one of our schools that we play against. They're in our league. And so, there's that point too, watching little LeBron play, and then watching Bryce. And we ran up against Bryce a couple times, and we would scrimmage his AAU team because his AAU coach is a friend of mine. So it's just neat to see all that he's done. And then we go back to St. V for a lot of things, and just to kind of be there in the same gym where LeBron and his teammates were at. It's just a cool feeling. It's like, it's
awesome.
It's NBA, it's basketball history.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Forever. Right.
Yeah. I'll tell you. And LeBron was always a cool kid. We had when it was his junior year, the team I was at was an Akron public school, Firestone High School. And I was the assistant varsity there, working with a buddy of mine, Dan Flood. He was the head coach. We were playing in a preview. And in the preview around here, you can actually dunk. Like in a regular warm-up, regular season, you can't dunk during warm-ups. But in a preview, you can. So you come out and you play a half. And we were playing – I don't even remember who we were playing. All I remember is St. V was playing in the game after us. So St. V came in, and, of course, it was like that little kid on the soccer field, an airplane goes over and everybody stops. I mean, that's what it was like against – here comes St. V. So everyone stops, and they're decked out in their green Adidas gear, and they come in. And then – we proceeded to go through our warm-ups. Well, one of our kids, his name was Kenny, decided he was going to kind of tomahawk dunk it. He's a guard, and everybody's feeling the juices pre-warm-up, and he goes up, and that ball hits hard off the front of the rim, and I'm standing underneath the basket. He lands on the ground with his legs behind him, and he snaps his tibia. He rolls over, and his tibia is like this. So I'm like, crap, I'm not trained for this. I mean, what do you do? And you don't have cell phones or anything like that. None of that stuff's around. So I run out, I kind of cover him up so he can't see it, so he doesn't go into shock, but we holler. The ambulance comes, takes him, and carts him off. Well, shortly thereafter, I'm in the locker room, and I'm just in there, and LeBron comes walking in. And LeBron's like, "Hey, Coach Horner, how's Kenny?" I'm like, how do you know me? But it's LeBron. I mean, LeBron knows everything. If it's about the game and whoever he's competing or whoever's where he was at. I mean, he loved the game. So he loves the game that much that he's, paying attention to that stuff, and he knows it. He's like, "How's Kenny doing?" I'm like, "Well, LeBron, he's hurt. He'll be okay. We'll cast him up and start the recovery." And he goes, "Well, let Kenny know I'm praying for him." And I thought that was just a really cool gesture. And I like to tell the kids that, here's this guy, even at that stage, he's a superstar. And he already knows his ticket's written to the NBA. And now we know all that was going on in his life when he was a junior, and how, he had to really push through a lot of stuff. But I thought that was cool. That's cool.
Awesome, man. I mean, for a kid to do that, first of all, when you said that he called you by your name, that kind of reminds me of Coach K and how people always talk about him, that he studies the opponent's, coaching staff from the first player to the last player, and he'll call them by name at the end of a game when they shake hands. That's awesome, man. That's a great story, man. Well, let's go back. Let's go question number 5. All right, so instead of the show being called Coach Mike on the Mic, it's called Coach Mark on the Mic. Who would you be sitting down right now speaking with?
Who would I be sitting down right now speaking with? Well, I would pull in my high school basketball coach, Coach Greg McDivitt. Earlier this week, one of the questions that was asked, and something I was doing on Twitter, a Twitter chat, who was the most influential teacher or person in your life? And when I was in high school, it was Coach McDivitt, because he coached me in basketball, but then he coached me in life as well. We would talk hoops, and we would talk everything, dating. We'd talk life. He taught a class at high school, and I always wanted to be in that class. He would call me out when I was being an idiot. He had high expectations for me. He challenged me. He worked me hard. Sometimes I didn't appreciate it. Sometimes I didn't like getting yelled at and held to that standard. But, when I reflect back, he is the most influential coach, and somebody that I just kind of I still consider a mentor. I love to sit down and talk hoops, especially with the knowledge I have now of, coaching seeing one who's coaching to just sit down and pick his brain. I actually have over here on my shelf is the original binder from like my I don't know, freshman or sophomore year. With the old like the copies, so the blue ink kind of smears on it, and somehow I don't even know how I look in it, and it's in one of these boxes in here. So that's who I would have.
All right, well, that's my 5 questions, Coach Horner. So it's your turn, man. Shoot away.
Wow, those are 5 intense questions, man. I don't know. So I'm gonna have to elevate quickly.
No, it's good, man. It's good. Bring it on.
Oh, how about this? All right, how about if you had one book that you could take with you, if you're stranded on an island and it's one book, what's the one book that you would have with you?
I think the easiest answer for me would be the Bible. I mean, that's like, right? I mean, because you could read that thing 1,000 times, and each time you're going to take away something different on each book and each chapter and each verse, and I could read that into perpetuity. But
other than the Bible,
yeah,
I knew you were going to say the Bible.
Other than the Bible, I'd be lying if I just threw out an answer and named a title of a book, but it would be a book that would, remind me that, to be a leader, and how to influence other people. Yeah. Which, if I'm stranded on an island, I guess I wouldn't have anybody to influence other than the fish and the sharks around me. But, something that was uplifting, motivational, empowering, something like that.
Well, to your point about, the Bible, it's amazing. The more you read it, the more you see how much it's influenced other leadership books. I find myself now, I'll start reading a leadership book and I'm like, that's from Proverbs so-and-so, or Jesus demonstrated that, So it's pretty amazing. All right. One of your former players is sitting across from you with your podcast. How would they describe you in one word?
Meticulous. I'm a very, very detail-oriented. I love the details of the game. I love, if you had to pick one or the other, if you're an offensive coach or a defensive coach, we all have to be both, but I love offense. I love X's and O's. I love schemes. I love playing chess with my players on the court. And so, when I coach, I'm very particular with where I want you on the court, how I want you to go set that screen, how precisely I want you to hit and hold before you go get a rebound. So I'm into the details of the game, and I think the guys would know for sure that I'm definitely a meticulous coach.
All right. It sounds very John Wooden-like. Small details make great things happen, don't they?
That's right, man.
So when you're coaching and you're on the court, do you break those things down really small? Like you take, okay, here's where we want to get, so let's kind of break down, even like the fundamental footwork. You show them the specific details? Yeah,
that's probably more obviously in practice, right? I mean, in game time, I can't really do that. But in practice, I coach JV, but, we're all in the gym together. So it doesn't matter if it's a varsity player or a JV player or a freshman. I think it's our job as high school coaches to prepare those kids to play at the next level if that's what they want to do. And I take pride in that, because if I end up sending a kid to go play college basketball and he doesn't have the skill set that they should have in college, that's on me as a high school coach. And we'll kind of talk about it a little bit as a middle school coach, kind of where you think kids should be before they get to us. But I think we each play a part aside from their life, right? Because there's more to coaching than just bouncing the ball and scoring points. But specifically with basketball, I think we each play a role in developing the fundamentals and the skill set for these kids before they go off to college. So, and that's why I feel like it's so important to coach the details of the game, because people can sit there and draw plays and have the amazing game plan, but they don't have the skill set in the game plan. So it's a fine balance. You've got to balance that skill set with X's and O's, because without the other, you're only going to be limited to, how successful you're going to have as a coach and as a basketball team in a season. So.
Awesome. That's awesome. All right, here's another one for you. You can have dinner with anyone from the past. Who would you pick?
Dinner with anyone from the past. I'm going to go outside of basketball because I think that's, we're doing a basketball podcast here, and that answer would be Pistol Pete Maravich. But outside of that, man, someone asked me a question like this. I've got another podcast called Keeping Up with the Knights. It's a teacher podcast for teachers here at Steele High School here in Texas. But I read a book that just had an impact on me by Nelson Mandela. And just how you can take a bad situation and being imprisoned for how many years that he was imprisoned, but yet he was still able to influence the world from a jail cell. That to me just amazes me, how someone can take something negative and be captivated, or captured, I should say, and then imprisoned, but yet still have the mindset of empowering others, lifting others up, bringing a country together and a world together. It was an amazing book, and I can see the picture of the front cover. I don't remember what the title was. It's a gray cover. It's like black and white with white letters, Nelson Mandela. But man, someone like that, maybe it's not just him, but I would want to speak to someone who had such influential impact, not only on themselves, but others, but like just a global, I love pioneers. That's probably what I'm trying to go for. I would want to interview a pioneer that stood for something, that knew that it was right, and then did something about it.
Fantastic. I like that. You're gonna have to shoot me the name of that book. It sounds amazing. So Coach Mike, your life is a movie. Who plays you?
All right. First thing that popped in my head, my son. I would want my son because, my hair's standing up, man. I'm a proud father, and God has certainly blessed me with 2 children. And I actually feared early in my relationship with my wife for some reason. I absolutely love kids. I grew up with a big family. I've got a lot of siblings and a lot of nieces and nephews, and I just loved caring for them. My twin sister had a child early on, and I can just remember holding him and I love kids. And for whatever reason, I put my faith aside, which is wrong to begin with, but I just had this fear that I would not be blessed with children, which is so false. And so to have a son as my firstborn child, I know we're going to talk hoops here, but I've got a story to tell. I've been through a lot of things in my life. I tend to think that I have a positive spirit about me. I like the growth mindset of the way I think. It wasn't all easy. There were definitely some hardships and things that I had to learn the hard way. But I would want my son, it's one way to say it, but if he were to enact everything that I went through, I think it would give a different appreciation for who his father is. Wow.
That's awesome. And I've got to reciprocate now. You should see my arm. I've got the chills on my arm. And I love that. It is amazing. I have 2 kids as well. My firstborn is my daughter, Kelsey. She's a senior here. And then my son is a freshman. But the 2 of them, they've heard a lot of my stories because I've had them in class, or they've sat in on some lessons and some keynotes that I've given. But I've made a lot of mistakes, and I had a portion of my life just like you where I put my faith aside, and deeply regret a lot of that, but invaluable experience. But it made me the man I am and the husband and father I am today. But those insecurities that you're talking about, I felt them too. And sometimes I still feel them. I mean, even this morning I was reflecting on, okay, well, I didn't really do a good job being a father yesterday. I got to tighten some things up and get back to the fundamentals of fatherhood. So, but man, what a story. I want to hear more about it one of these days.
Hey man, we certainly will. All right. Well, let's get in. Let's talk a little bit. You and I haven't talked before, in person, face to face like this through a screen or whatnot. So I just like to know, where you grew up and what your childhood life was like.
All right, so I grew up in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, which is another it's just right outside of Akron. I have not wandered very far. Grew up, went to Stowe schools because we were kind of on the border, and that's where we ended up going. Then I went to Cuyahoga Valley Christian Academy, a private school, and it was there that I really started playing a lot of basketball. Middle school basketball and then high school basketball. Fell in love with basketball, and thought at one point I was going to play college basketball. Wanted to play some small college, had a couple opportunities, made some bad decisions, decided I was going to go to the University of Akron and I was going to walk on there. So a lot of times this up here is a little bit bigger than your ability. Went to the University of Akron, ended up trying out, had an interesting, tryout experience at the time, made it to the second round of the cuts. But then I was just, I'm 6 foot at our school. I was playing I was a post player. And even at the University of Akron, they weren't Division One. I'm going to play the post. You had to be a guard, and tried to make that transition to, work on my ball handling and all of that stuff. But it just didn't work out. And that's God's plan. I ended up going to the University of Akron. It took me a while to get through Akron. I actually hold the record in the family for the longest time to get a college degree. It took me 8 years. And part of the reason is that part we were talking about. I just made some mistakes, bad decisions, stepped away from my faith, and got distracted. But, God brought me back, and I met my wife. And when I met my wife, she ended up, really becoming this foundational piece to who I am today. And she just pushed me to become a better person. And so she's actually from Northwest Ohio. She was actually probably just moved back to Northwest Ohio, where it's just all farmland and small communities. But I persuaded her to stay here, and we ended up, got married. We now live in Tallmadge. I've been teaching at Tallmadge for 22 years. We live here. We love it here. Coached at every level in every sport, middle school or high school. But I just love basketball. So I coach 7th grade basketball, 8th grade boys and girls basketball, been a freshman coach, been a JV coach, an assistant varsity coach, never been a varsity coach. But I've filled those roles many, many times in different places. And most recently came back, I'm coaching 8th grade boys basketball here at Tallmadge High School. But we are proud Tallmadge Blue Devils.
All right, man. Good deal. So you said that, you started playing basketball. Was that in your middle school years, I guess, when you started playing?
I played in 6th grade at Highland Elementary, but I wouldn't call that played. I think I ran around and had very little coordination. I'm not sure I even scored a basket. It was pretty bad. And but when I went into 7th grade, I kind of hit a growth spurt, a mini growth spurt, and then I hit a bigger one going into 8th grade. And gained some coordination and started playing not seriously, but loved my 7th grade experience. And then from that point on, 8th grade and on, I was pretty serious about it.
So share with me and maybe like a highlight that you remember in your basketball playing career.
A highlight. Well, I do remember, one of the biggest things, and it's probably because I tell my boys about this all the time, because I still kind of hold the record for most rebounds in a game. I pulled down 27 rebounds in a game. That game stands out to me because I actually hyperextended my elbow. And so I couldn't score as my right elbow, and I finished with 10 points and 27 rebounds. But I literally remember every time I'd look at, if I'd stop moving my arm, you could start to see it fill with fluid. And the first shot I took after I hyperextended it, I chucked the ball up over the top of the backboard because I just lost all, sense of feel. So I'm like, do not take me out. I'm playing up real tight, and then just started focusing on setting good screen, boxing up, and finished with 27 rebounds. And that was a highlight. I do remember one game in middle school, 8th grade, we were playing in a tournament, and it's not so much a highlight as much as a memorable event, but ended up getting bashed up pretty good and cut my eye right here. And I was running down the sideline, and I got blood coming down the sideline. My mom out of the crowd screaming to stop playing. And they stopped playing. Of course, I was, competitive, and I thought it was sweat. And look at my hands, all blood. I wiped across my white jersey. But they took me in the back and they butterflied it. We didn't even go get stitches. They just put some tape on it and went back out and played and ended up having a really good game and winning the game. So kind of that whole experience was a bit memorable. But yeah, it was just a lot of good memories, a lot of friendships, a lot of friends that I made, a lot of here's what's really interesting, to be honest with you, Coach. Recently, a lot of the guys that I played with or played, a few years after me, and still I knew them. We've all started to kind of reconnect recently. Even as early as last night, I had a conversation with one of my. He played a few years after me, but we were connected because of basketball in our school, and we would always talk hoops back then, and then we would separate, and I run into him at the grocery store, all places. 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, just talking hoops and talking about where people are at.
All right. So next question for you is, when did you realize that you wanted to get into coaching basketball?
So when I was in college, I kind of drifted quite a bit. At first I started off with wanted to be an archaeologist, then I wanted to be a psychologist, then I wanted to be a radio DJ. I was all over the place. Met my wife and we started dating. And at that point, I'd actually started taking history classes because I loved history. And at one point we sat down and she's like, listen, Mark, you're going to have to get a degree if we want to talk about taking our game to the next level and getting married. And so I thought, well, I love history and I love basketball and I want to coach. And I was actually coaching my brother's makeshift middle school team at a small private Christian school. And it was made up of 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade boys and girls. And so I thought, you know what, I want to coach. I enjoy it. I love basketball. And so then I started heading towards becoming a teacher. And by the time I finished my student teaching, I had picked up a job. That was the first time I picked up the 8th grade coaching position here. I'll never forget, we had a coaching in the area. He was a bit of a legend named Jackie Reynolds. His father was a complete legend, coached at a legendary Barberton High School, good friends with Dean Smith. I walked in, here I am, this new teacher, and I walk in and his Jackie Reynolds Jr. is laying on the couch. I'm like, I hear you need people to coach. And he goes, yeah, what do you want? You want JV coach? You want 8th grade? You want 7th grade? Which one do you want? I said, well, how about 8th grade? Because I was hoping to get a job teaching 8th grade. He goes, all right, it's all yours. I'm like, that's it? That's my interview? He goes, yep. I don't even think he even looked at me behind, maybe glanced at me from behind the sports page while he's checking out the scores. And so I got my first official paid position as a middle school basketball coach. But when I was, finishing up, I started to fall in love with coaching and education. And I honestly, Coach, I really thought my goal was to coach at the college level. That's what my goal ended up being. And I was like, I would set up my hefty VHS camera and I would set it up to record our practices. I'd go home and watch film. I would break everything down. And I was more of a Bobby Knight type of a coach at that time. I was like, and all that, but I fell in love with coaching. But then I started teaching. And I got real serious about being a teacher, and my desires kind of shifted. I fell in love with the classroom and then started looking at coaching as just another vehicle of impacting lives, and instead of wanting to become a college basketball coach or even want to become a varsity basketball coach, I wanted to just start impacting young men and building those relationships. And so it was at that point where right after that first year of coaching 8th grade basketball, I fell in love with it as a tool to impact lives. So,
well, you and I again have things in common there, because that's definitely what I love about coaching. And I had aspirations of being a college basketball coach. But that didn't come until after I was already coaching. In hindsight, I had the opportunities that were probably there when I was at the University of Tulsa, when Bill Self was there, and then followed up by Buzz Peterson, and then John Phillips, and then I went to Texas Tech when Bobby Knight was there, and then his son was there, and Coach Beard, who's now the coach at Texas Tech. Like, if I could go back and do things a little differently, I do love coaching. But knowing how much I pay attention to the details of the game, I would really love to coach college basketball. But you and I both know that if either one of us were to go get into college coaching right now, we'd probably take a massive pay cut. We would have to be, low on the totem pole, you'd be a third assistant, a director of operations. You just trying to get your foot into the door. And, obviously being married and having kids, it's not going to happen. But certainly wish now I would have taken the opportunity then to maybe be a equipment manager or, just a manager of any kind doing stats or anything, just to be around those coaches and just learn and listen to those guys. Who knows where I'd be today. All right. So you've been a basketball coach. So talk about like the different places that you've been. Like, have you been all at one school? Have you been at multiple schools? You kind of talked about how you've coached a lot of levels. Kind of talk about your journey as a coach in the schools that you've been to.
So when I first started eighth grade, I coached here at Tallmadge Middle School because I was an eighth grade history teacher, and I wanted to be there. You know how important it is to be a coach in the hallways, in the classroom, be around your players and around your kids. And I stayed there, and then I went to CVCA where I had graduated, and I coached there under a guy named Dave Piper. Phenomenal guy. He's living in North Carolina now. He still coaches, and he's actually like a life coach as well. He's a teacher and super dynamic. And I learned so much from him just watching the way that he interacted with players. Quite a few of his players went on to play at the college level. And I was a JV coach and then assisted him on the bench. From that point, then I ended up going to an area school, Firestone High School, to coach with a friend of mine. His name Dan Flood. And we had an absolute blast coaching. We had a really good team. I was actually only there for one full season. I started preseason, and then we went into postseason. So almost 2 years total, but we only coached one season because then he resigned. He wanted young kids, and his life took him a different direction. But that one season in the city was unbelievable because we were surrounded by incredible basketball players, super fast-paced. I mean, our front line was 6'11", 6'8", 6'5", and like 6'2". And all of them went to play Division II or Division I basketball. So it was, we'd always do these mic and drills, and these kids, our big guy, he would never even lay it in, man. It was just like dropping it back, into the hoop and dunking it. It was unbelievable. From there, I came back to Tallmadge, and I coached freshmen, and I coached them for one season because we found out we were expecting my daughter. And when we found out, my wife was like, all right, you got one more season and then she'll be here and you need to be home. And so I was coaching a couple different sports at the time. I was also the girls varsity golf coach. So I didn't give up that right away. I had to keep that job because it was a great coaching position and I kind of fit our schedule a little bit better, but I gave up coaching for basketball for a while. But then my daughter and my son, by that point he come along, started the youth circuit. And so I jumped in at kindergarten, the little dribblers, and worked all the way up through all youth basketball with them. Ended up running our youth program, Tallmadge Youth Basketball, and ran it for many years and kind of oversaw it, and then moved back into middle school. Now I'm coaching middle school, and who knows what will happen when my kids are through. Now my son's playing basketball, obviously, and I'm not going anywhere near that bench for the next 4 years. I may help out in an open gym, but other than that, I'm staying out of that gym when he's playing and letting him enjoy his high school experience. But then who knows what might happen after that.
And he's what grade right now?
He's a freshman.
All right. What position does he play right now?
So he plays, honestly, he plays all the way around. You know that there's, we're kind of like positionless anymore.
Right.
And our offense kind of caters to that now. We get up and down the court. Our coach's goal is to run 10 players and just, run nonstop, full court press, and then a real fluid offense where everybody can score from anywhere. But he can play any position. Last year when he was playing eighth grade for me, he would run point. He's got really good ball handling skills. But I've had moments where he's been an off guard. I'll put him in the corner and tell him to pull up for threes, and if I need to, sometimes I put him, like when we're running our X offense against, a odd front zone, I'll put him at the high post because he can spin and seal people really well and he can set good screens. So he's pretty versatile.
That's good. That's a good problem to have for any coach and for any player to be versatile, in an age where we are positionless basketball. We kind of do the same thing with our guys. We're all guards, The days of having a big dominant five in the low post is obsolete. And if you do have one, it's a tremendous asset to your team when you've got a big like that, because if people don't have that same person in their gym, they're not practicing guarding that.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you do have it, how do you prepare for that?
Yeah.
You gotta X's and O's and scheme what you're gonna do for a guy like that. So
it's hard finding kids with the right mentality to defend that as well. That's one of the things I loved when I played. I was always undersized as a post player, but man, I loved trying to get in people's heads. I loved to just pick and pester and just irritate and, try to draw charges and just stuff like that. But not a lot of kids have that type of a mentality anymore.
I know. And when you find it, you absolutely love it. And you love those kids. We have a point guard right now, our principal's son, who's probably, 5'9", 5'10" max, something like that. And anytime one of our bigs gets down there, you can just see him grinning. Like, he loves it. Let's go,
Yeah.
All right. So as a middle school coach, what do you feel is the most important aspect of coaching for you to achieve?
The most important aspect, hands down, is developing these young men to extend further than the court, to be people of influence. I mean, that's my ultimate goal. We sit down and I talk with my parents and with my kids, and, I share with them what my why is, and it's pretty simple: establish relationships, inspire people, and influence people, and I use the sport as a way of teaching principles of life. And how are you going to be as a young man? How are you going to act in the hallways, in the classroom? But then I love, that's what I love about basketball, though, because you can break down any scenario in basketball, and you can go through the ups and downs of the season. You can say, okay, here you're facing an uphill battle against a team that's much better than you. I mean, you can take any situation, and then you can relate it to life. And so that's what I just constantly try to do. Let's talk about how basketball can be used to make you a better potential, husband, father, college student, someone who enlists in the military, the best employee you can be. And then I just do my best to prep them for high school basketball. And I constantly stop them. Hey, Coach Johnson, we're standing right here. This is how you should respond to him. This is how you should act towards him. This is what you should do so that you stand out in his eyes. This is what he's looking for in a player. Here's how you get, where you want to be at the high school level. And that's just constant. I mean, I'm constantly reinforcing what Coach Johnson wants me to reinforce on our court. So prepping them for life and prepping them for varsity basketball.
So it's a good segue into my next question, because it says, what do you need from your high school coaches to ensure your program is a success? And it sounds like you all have good communication between both programs.
Yeah, we're pretty in sync. And you know what, Coach Johnson, he's a young coach. This will be his third, maybe fourth season here at the high school. And every season he grows. He's got that growth mindset as well. And every year we have more things that run parallel to each other. He always knows that my number one goal is to run the program the way that he wants it to be run. And I tell him that all the time, and we talk about it. But like even at Open Gym the other night, I'm like, listen, how do you want me to teach? We want to hedge these screens, or do you want them switching, or what do you want? And he backs off. He goes, you know what? I want you to read what your players are able to do, and then you teach them what's going to work best for you. And so I felt, pretty validated there. He trusted me. Then on the flip side, there are times where he said, listen, you have to teach this. This is the principle that we need to, that needs to be taught. This is the language that you need to use. And so there, sometimes it's tough because I've been around a lot longer than he has. So a lot of that terminology is different. And so I have to retrain myself to use his terminology because the kids need to be familiar with it. And it just makes it a little bit easier transition into high school. So.
It just sounds awesome, the fact that you guys have that kind of relationship where, not being a head coach, I don't know the dynamic and the conversations that happen between the head coach and your middle school coaches. And to hear you kind of talk about how you're throwing yourself out there, I'm sure that Coach Johnson is really appreciating you to have in his corner. because some coaches that coach middle school, they may not have the same mindset that you do. They might just be there.
Yep.
They might just be coaching. They might just be teaching. They maybe don't really care about their own personal growth as a coach. And then maybe that head coach and that the head varsity coach and the middle school coach don't have that relationship, and that bond is not there. That trust is not there. And so now you've kind of got two different programs that really don't blend into each other. So that's awesome to hear that you guys have that. How big is your high school and how big is your middle school?
Wow. Numbers wise for the the high school's got about almost a little bit over 700.
Okay.
So, and it fluctuated. I hesitate because for a moment there, I'm thinking, okay, well, how many kids do we have remote versus how many kids do we have in place? But a normal year, we'll have a little over 700.
Okay.
And so the middle school's got probably about 150 kids per class.
Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
give or take,
So I'm wondering if that dynamic of a smaller school kind of lends itself to have more of that close-knit relationships. Are y'all all on the same campus together?
We are not, but I will tell you, this year our high school basketball coach is now up here at the high school. So with the remote, or the way that they shifted things around because of COVID, they actually moved the 8th grade up to the high school.
Okay.
So that we could space out. We have a brand new middle school and we have a brand new elementary campus, and they are both side by side. So K through 8th are all on the same site, but now they moved 8th up to here. Then they moved 5th grade into the middle school so they could socially distance. That's been really cool. They moved Coach Johnson up here, so I see him every day, and he's got a class right next to mine, so we're always chatting. But then I get to see the 8th graders too. So these kids that are going to be playing for me here in a couple of weeks, now I get to see them in the hallways. I can walk down to their wing, and I can make myself visible. And it really is interesting because even at open gym the other night, just seeing them there's a little bit of a different comfortable feeling, that we wouldn't even be remotely close to that at this point in the year because I'd never see them, and I might not even know who the heck's trying out for basketball at this point, So.
Well, it's a big difference where I'm at. We've got, our the high school that I'm at has about 2,600 students at the high school. I really don't know how many we have at the middle school, but it's our feeder, and it's our only feeder middle school, so it's got to be pretty massive too.
It's halftime.
So this part of my podcast I like to call halftime, just to kind of take a little break here, and then we'll kind of dive into some more questions here. So it's just it's going to be five more questions for you, and then I'll move on with the next set of questions. So if you could star in a movie, what movie would it be? A movie that's already out. It can be old, it can be new, it can be a cartoon. I don't care. What movie are you starring in?
My star, man, what movie am I star? Oh, it's got to be one of the episodes of Star Wars.
All right.
I mean, who wouldn't want to be an eternal hero?
All right. Do you have any superstitions or routines that you do on game day?
Well, I always have to have my coffee.
Okay.
And so I'll stop and I'll get the same coffee, and I actually keep it there with me. On the sideline with me. Sometimes, during AAU season, that means I'm running down to Starbucks before every game. It'd be a little expensive, but I always have that. I always have my journal with me. I kind of feel lost without that because I like to write down some thoughts while I'm reflecting and, in mid game and things like that. But then, honestly, I have to always slip into that locker room. I've got to kind of focus myself, and I get the pregame jitters, man. I got to go to the bathroom. I got to go in there. I got to, kind of give myself the pep talk, and that always happens. So I slip away before all the boys are in the locker room, and then we proceed. So.
All right. And proudest moment in your life so far?
Oh, marrying my wife and seeing both my kids enter this world. Life doesn't get any better than that. Than that moment I saw my wife walk down the aisle, and then when I saw both my daughter and my son enter this world.
Amen. I ditto that, man. Best vacation you've ever been to?
The best vacation we went to. My wife and I, for our 15th wedding anniversary, we went to the Maya Riviera, just the two of us, or Riviera Maya, whichever one. It was just the two of us, and just loved it. just being, and it was at a point in time, you know, the kids were kind of that age where it was hard to leave them. But then when we got away, it was great to be away. But then we had about 2 days left and we're both like, okay, we miss our kids. But we're always talking about that. You know, we got to do that more. We got to get away more, like away.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I'm at that point. So we're celebrating 16 years in January, and got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old going on, 5 and 3. So I think we're getting closer to that point where mom and dad are going to have to get some alone time.
you have to.
All right. So Coach Horner, if you were not coaching and teaching, what profession would you be in?
When I'm asked this question, I got to tell you, I don't know if I could see myself doing anything. Probably. So it's interesting. If I weren't doing this, I might be involved in like youth ministry or be a pastor. But the reason I kind of look like I might have stood a better chance just being a homeless vagabond is because of my wife, being that I was aimless. I was kind of roaming around, and she helped bring that. She was kind of like my North Star at that point. And she just kind of brought, she saw that I was struggling with some things, and she added value and, validity to my life. And she helped pull out my strengths. And, so I don't know where I'd be without her. So.
Well, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time, right?
Amen.
All right. So, you and I kind of had a little conversation on Facebook originally about raise your game. Either you presented the question or someone presented the question about books that, you should read. And I threw it out there. I was like, hey, man, I love this book. I just got done reading it, blah, blah, blah. In a world of social media, you don't know who listens. You don't know who reads. Yeah. Apparently, you read my comment and you took it upon yourself to read it and then hold a book study with your basketball players. I know nothing about that. I've never done something like that, but I think through COVID, you're not the only person that has said something like this, that has done a book study of some kind with their basketball players. And I love the idea. I love the concept. I'm all in on that idea. But for those of the listeners that are like me that have never done something like that, just kind of share with us a little bit about like where the idea came from. How did it work? What did you do? Like the logistics of what it went. And then maybe if you were to do it differently, like what would you do differently if you did another book study with your athletes?
Well, I was the one who posed that, and I'm thankful that you reminded me of that book, because I'd heard of the book, because I like Alan. I love Alan Stein, and I remember when he was with Adam Bradley on the Hardwood Hustle. I think he was part of that with on that podcast, and so I would listen to that podcast a lot. And then he broke away and started doing his own thing. But that book. And it really wasn't anything elaborate, to be honest. And I'm going to do it again this year. I'm actually going to get the book for all of my 8th graders, and we're going to hold a team book study. And that book is perfect for young men. The boys that I did it with, there were 4 of them that we met, and we just met at a local coffee shop once it opened up. And we would just grab a cup of coffee and we'd meet for an hour, and we just broke it up, 1 or 2 chapters at a time. And that particular book is pretty easy because you could read it and then they have the key points at the back. So worst case scenario, if you're not getting any dialogue, read the key point and the kids expand on it. But they really, really enjoyed it. So I had, my son was one of them. And then I had 3 sophomores who are going to be, they're playing JV here. So it was just the 4 of us that met, and they loved it. Absolutely loved it. They learned so much from it. And it was really cool because what would happen, we started in the summer where they're still doing summer ball. And so we would read about a principle, and then I would text them the next day and say, okay, you're on your way to practice. Here's how you're going to exemplify. Give me an example of how you exemplify servant leadership, or how are you going to display confidence, or how are you going to value your teammates? And then they would bounce back with some ideas. And then I was able to hold them accountable and follow up with them, and at the same time, I was telling them that, I'm doing the same thing. There was one section where it talked about, I can't remember the exact chapter, but the challenge was to find somebody that could pour into you, and then find somebody that you could pour into. And so we did that. We talked about, who did you reach out to have them pour into you, and who did you pour into? And the stories were awesome. These kids were reaching out to people on social media that they hadn't talked to, or a teacher they hadn't talked to, and then they were reporting back. And one of them was like, I started talking to my brother again. Didn't really talk to my brother very much, but I made an intentional effort to talk to him because that's what Alan Stein said I should do. So, but it was good. You know, I always tell them readers are leaders and leaders are readers. And even now, in this age of this information age that we're in, taking a book, reading it, annotating it like you do. I know you do that a lot, you know, highlighting, pulling things out of it and then tweeting them out, sharing about them. It's invaluable, and kids need to read. And I know they liked it. My son loved it. He loved reading it. And to get him to love reading, or any young man to love reading at this point, it's an accomplishment. But
Yeah, what I hear from you and what I really like is I hear accountability, right? It has that accountability piece. I mean, number one, I mean, most importantly, forget about the book for a second, Coffee with Coach. I mean, that just has a ring to it. You know, that's a podcast title right there, you know, coffee with Coach. But that's one aspect. But the other piece is that accountability. Let's read something together, but you're also modeling behavior as a man on later in life, 15, 20 years down the road, when you're my age, who are you going to be sitting down and having coffee with? Yeah. You know, so you're modeling that behavior, and they may not recognize that piece yet, but later in life, maybe they're sitting down with their son, having coffee, sharing information about a book. But man, as a kid, I really wish that I had a coach like you that would sit down with me and have conversations about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a basketball player, that there's more to this life other than dribbling this basketball. Man, I hated reading. And I don't know where I had and I say the word hate because I truly did. I knew I was in like AP courses and dual credit courses and whatnot that challenged me, that my mom put me in those situations to make me a better student. But I did not have an appreciation for reading books and literature. I do now in my life. And man, if I could just go back in time and pick up books like I'm reading now, man, I'd be in a different place, you know, right now. But I can't put books down. I absolutely love reading books. And that's why when I heard about you doing a book study with your basketball players, I was like, man, I gotta find out more about this and how it worked. But if you were to do it differently, though, what would, you know, you mentioned that you're going to do a book study with everybody. So you're going to do the same book?
I'm going to do the same book because it's a whole new group of kids.
Okay.
And I am going to do the same book. I think this time, I know for sure, I am going to put together my own list of questions. Okay. And probably give them like guided reading questions to read while they go along doing it. Because, you know, our general format was, hey, all right, each of you, you know, what jumped out at you. So the first couple of weeks, that's what we did. And then I found that I was talking a little too much. And so then I would give them and I got them a journal at the very beginning, just a little, just a little notebook, a cheap one, $1 at Dollar General. But I got each of them. So then I'd give them a journal prompt after our discussion. Okay, reflect. And here's what I want you to write down, or, you know, here's what you're, one of the things he talks about in his book is, you know, what's one thing that went well, what's one thing that didn't go well, and what are you going to do to fix number 2? What didn't go well? And, you know, so we started journaling with that every day. And I've actually continued that in my class. Every day in my class, we answer that journal prompt just in their written notebook, off their Chromebooks. They get to write it out. But I would have more questions, more kind of guided questions. I think that'll make it go a little bit easier. Plus, I'm dealing with a younger group, 8th grade as opposed to 9th and 10th graders. So it's definitely going to be important. But it's such a good book. And I think that's what's cool now is like there's a lot of really neat books that appeal to young men now. When I was growing up, there really wasn't. I mean, it was the Chronicles of Narnia, which I read about a half a dozen times.
I love that book.
Yeah. It's like, other than that, there wasn't anything I wanted to read. I hated reading too.
Man, I swear you and I were meant to meet and meant to talk, man, because that Chronicles of Narnia, that thing is about this thick. But I remember reading them when, you know, you read those small, book titles by themselves. But yeah, that's probably one of my favorite books growing up as a kid.
Yeah, for real.
All right, so describe something that you do. Let's talk a little bit about basketball, like X's and O kind of stuff. Describe something that you do in practice every day that is a non-negotiable, like a drill or a skill, you know, whether it's shell, whether it's a ball handling. Do you do anything every single day in practice?
Well, we definitely do shell every day.
Okay.
Every day, and have to stop and repeat the same things every single day. But the one drill that we do religiously, we call it Black Hawk, and it was stolen. Oh man, I'm trying to remember. He coached at Dayton. His name will come to me. I'm kind of forgetting, but it's a bust the cutter drill. So you got to man up on the top of the key on the ball, and then he'll pass to one wing. So you got to jump into help position, but then that guy makes a basket cut, and you got to bust him. And I make him fight him all the way down the key. But then as soon as they get to the bottom and they release him, the ball will rotate back to the top. You got to close out, and then he'll make a pass to the opposite wing, and you got to bust him all the way down. And then the third closeout at the top of the key, they go live one-on-one. And the boys love it because it's super physical. And I encourage as much contact as you possibly can. And then they just compete against each other, and they love going one-on-one. But we do that every time, just kind of teach the physical aspect of the game and pound home the point that, listen, basketball is not a soft sport. You have to initiate contact. You got to own your space. You are as deserved to, that spot is yours until you give it up. So don't ever let a guy kind of cut over top of you, battle him every time, and then talk about how if you do that nonstop the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, by the fourth quarter, they either aren't going to make that cut or they're going to be too tired. And so you just want to out physical them. So
yeah, no, I love it. I love see kids will do what you preach to them, right? Like if you preach physicality, then they need to do that. That's the expectation. I'm still at the age where I can get on the court and do some of those drills and hit and stuff, but we tell them the same thing. I always tell this one story. Maybe this kid listens to this, but there's a basketball player I had years ago. His name's Eric Lambert. And Eric would we would do, like, let's say a free throw drill, and the coach is shooting the free throws and they're working on blocking out, right? Mm-hmm. He would love it when he would rotate all the way around to that spot where he got to block out the coach, the shooter. Man, every single time I'd shoot a free throw, that dude would come over and just blast me right in my knees and my thighs, man. So I got to the point when he got to that spot, I'm going to shoot and get out of the way. And that's the same thing that you try to tell your athletes. When they come into your house, when they go into the paint, that is a free shot. Hit them legally and make them pay, because he's going to stop coming into the paint, So you got to wear him down, win or lose, wear him down and fight like hell. So it sounds like you guys, I like y'all's style of play. Y'all are physical and y'all are fast. You're going to get up and down the court. You're going to press and make things happen. So I like that. I've been coaching for 15 years now at the high school level, and I coached AAU for 2 or 3 years. And, in my own growth as a basketball coach, I would always go to these basketball clinics. And here in the state of Texas, we have TABC, Texas Association of Basketball Coaches. Usually happens every May. And it's just a great time for coaches to get together and from all over the state of Texas, which, is a huge state, and go listen to college coaches. And one thing that I just picked up on is that whenever these coaches talk, they always say, hey, this is the drill we do every day. Hey, this is the drill we do every day. And I started thinking about myself, and I'm like, man, we do different drills every day. Mm-hmm. What do we do? And so as a coaching staff, we kind of challenged each other, and we've got drills that we do every day now. We do a closeout drill that we call Rebel Drill. But, it's just, I like to ask that question. I like to know what other people do every single day, because what you do every single day is what your kids are going to do, and that's the expectation. What is your biggest strength? I know this sounds like a really interview cliche kind of question to ask here, but what is your biggest strength as a basketball coach, you? And then what is your area improvement that you need to have as a coach? And while you're thinking about that, here's why I'm asking that question. It sounds like you're a growth-minded coach. Mm-hmm. And I think coaches need to be vulnerable enough to say that I am not really good at this. But then again, that's why you have a coaching staff, right? That hopefully someone else, that's their baby, that's their cream of the crop, that they and everybody kind of edifies each other. But just asking you to go a little vulnerable here. What's your best part about you as a basketball coach that you feel confident, that's your biggest strength, and what's an area that you feel like you're not so good at as a coach?
My strength is establishing relationships, and I'm a great practice coach. I run a really just solid, organized practice, and I'm very good at recognizing our weaknesses and attacking them in practice. And so I think my players would agree with that. We're on the clock, and I keep things going. I have a good mix of what we do on consistently, as well as what we, new things to kind of get them thinking quick on their feet and changing things up. I make practice fun, and I try to do things where I tie in leadership principles. My weaknesses would be the two that came to mind immediately. And I think this is why I'm a great 8th grade coach. This is why I would not be a good varsity basketball coach yet. One is that a lot of times I don't use my timeouts efficiently because sometimes I get so amped up that my message isn't as clear as it needs to be. And I tell the kids that already, and it's really something I've been thinking a lot about. But then the other aspect is I'm not good at recognizing things as the game transpires. And I've got a couple guys that coach AAU with me, and they are so good at that. And so when they're sitting on the bench, a lot of times I tell them, and I tell my players all the time, I'm like, Coach Leslie's coaching Coach Horner right now because he's seeing things differently. I need to see him like he does and make that change, make that adjustment, because it could be the difference between a win and a loss on the court. So I don't recognize things very well, and so I'm really working. I'm trying to work on that. I haven't worked as diligently as I should have, because I'll be honest with you, when they canceled the beginning of AAU season and we went into quarantine, I stopped reading and studying basketball stuff. I was studying a whole bunch of other stuff and trying to adjust. So our first AAU game back, I felt like I was out of coaching shape. It was crazy. Some of the decision making and some of the play calling and things like that, because we just rolled into, we didn't even practice. We just went to a scrimmage and played. But yeah, got a long way to go in that area. And I'm blessed to have some guys who are very strong, solid basketball minds around me. And every time I'm by them, I learn something new.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a twin sister, and you might be my twin brother, man. But, that's actually one of my weaknesses is I get so wrapped up in the game that I don't know that number 34 has 27 points and 10 rebounds. Like, I just know what the score is. I know what we're doing, and I know what we're not doing, that I lose sight of that kind of stuff. I need people telling me, hey, he just had 4 threes in a row. I don't recognize those things either. So I'm right there with you. Is there like post game for you? And I know you've coached all levels, so it can be high school, it can be middle school. I always like to ask this question when college coaches come to recruit our guys. When I have that little small talk conversation before practice starts, I'm always curious to know what their priority stats are, because everybody looks at stats differently at the end of a game. So are there 1 or 2 stats that you really focus on after a game that you like to keep track of or prioritize, that you either reward or you bring back and you're like, guys, we won this game because of, or we lost this game because of? So go ahead and share if you have something to go with that.
Well, we do a lot with 50-50 balls and charges, those little small momentum shifters. One season I actually had a pair of charge shorts, and I stole this from my buddy Dan at Firestone. Anybody who took a charge, they would get to wear those shorts to the next practice, and any sprints that we had to run, you got to sit out. You didn't have to run them. So the one year I did that, and I had the kids, they would autograph the shorts, and we hang the shorts in the locker room. But we do that. We talk a lot about charges, and we do keep track of boxing out. Any kid who's injured, and I have 2 little managers, they got to keep track of who's boxing out, and then they keep track of who's forcing jump ball situations, who's diving on those balls. And those are really the only 2 stats that I really kind of hone in on. Sometimes I'll try to I forget the name of the system. I have it on my iPad, but it's I got it from Breakthrough Basketball, the app. But what you do is you keep track of the pluses and the positives and negatives. It kind of keeps a track so that by the end of the game, you got a score of like 1.25 or negative 0.75. And it shows you, okay, for every positive that I'm doing, every rebound, every basket I score, every free throw I make, if I come down the court and I turn it over, or if my guy gets by me because I don't close out the right way, then there's a point subtracted. And so then I tell the kids, okay, you want to be at about a 1.25 if you can be at a 1.45, you'll probably find yourself on the court during the clutch times, And so sometimes I'll use that if I have someone who can keep stats for me. As the middle school coach, it's usually just me on the sideline. So I don't have an assistant. Last year I did have 2 kids who stayed on as managers. I let them practice with us every day, but then they kept those 50-50 and rebounding, and they filmed for me. Those aggressive kind of momentum shifter stats. Those are the ones that I really hone in on.
I like that. Those 50-50 balls and charges for sure. I'm a charge kind of guy. And my thing, and I love that I'm taking away from you, is not letting them, or not making them run sprints the next day in practice. If they take a charge, or maybe they dive on the floor for a loose ball, that'll exclude you from the little conditioning part that we do at the beginning of practice. We call it a 3-minute run. They've got to go down and back full court 13 times. That's what we want our varsity players to make it in. They definitely need to be making it to 12, but 13 is the mark. They've got to get 13 down and backs. Let me rephrase. Not down and back is 1, or you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, and that would be 26. And we got that from UT. So I like that idea of maybe taking that away if you take a charge, or you do a 50-50 ball. But what I do is, and you either do this, I don't know if you already do this or not, but what I always like to do when my guys take a charge, because all of our games are filmed, the entire bench has to stand up and cheer and clap and yell and scream for that guy that just took the charge. And if I see you sitting down, you don't want to know what's going to happen the next day in practice. And so the guys now we're seeing guys like, even we just had a little tournament yesterday in San Antonio, little preseason, just kind of like, get to play, and guys are taking charges out there, and you see everybody standing up on the bench. And that's just awesome to watch when you're not even coaching, like, because we can't coach our guys right now. But it's awesome to watch them, because the guy that sits down, now you see the kids like picking him up, like, dude, he just took a charge. Like, you better stand up or you're going to run tomorrow in practice. So, so let me ask you a question. What do you do as a basketball coach to improve?
I read a lot, and I do listen to podcasts. Like I said, my interest in reading, I read a lot of leadership. Like, a lot of the books that you like are a lot of the books that I read, and you can certainly pull the coaching application from it. But I spent a lot of time on the PGC website, Point Guard College.
Love it.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time. I was actually part of the Key 5 coaching for a long time, and that was my professional development as a coach. I'm not involved in that right now, but I will attend a couple. There's a PGC shooting camp coming up. I'll take my son to that, and I'll go as an observing coach. But I really just buy into their philosophy, and I'm on that website, especially as the season gets closer. I'll be back on there and buying into it. I do ask a lot of questions, Coach Johnson or other coaches that I'm friends with, just kind of picking their brains. And like as I mentioned, those AAU coaches that work with me, and we have kind of our own little AAU program here. It's my son's team, and we just keep moving up. And so we've had them for a couple of years, and I've got a lot of really good basketball players on there. And like I said, a lot of really good, they're dads, but they're just incredible basketball minds. But I'll start feeding, once the season starts, I listen to the Hardwood Hustle religiously. I'll listen to other basketball podcasts. But I'm always on that PGC site.
So it's crazy. So when I first started toying with this idea of having a basketball podcast, I want to try to be a little bit different. I want to offer like a variety show. And you and I kind of talked about that before we officially started recording this episode. But Mano Watsa, man, he's one of the guys I have on my list of people to talk to. I reached out to him on social media. So if you have any connections, or anybody out there has connections, I want to talk to those PGC guys and get them on here, because I love their product. I love everything about PGC. I love going to their clinics. They would put on clinics here in the Dallas area that I would go to every year, usually around this time frame, usually late September, early October, somewhere around there. And it was just kind of a chance for the coaching staff to get away and go listen. But I love how everything is rehearsed. You can tell that everything is so detailed in their clinics. That suits me. Like, that speaks volumes to me, because that's how I function as a coach. When they say that their session is going to start at 1:05, like, they start their session at 1:05. If they say it's going to end at 1:46, like, they end it at 1:46. And I've just been so impressed by PGC basketball that I definitely want to have a chance to talk to those guys on this podcast. But
Well, when I sent along that, when I sent my son to camp, I mean, a lot of camps that they go to, these young men will go to, it turns into just entertainment, right? All they're going to do is play, swim in a pool, eat a lot of pizza, and there's no value to it. But PGC, when you're learning the leadership principles and how to be a leader on and off the court, that's what really appealed to me. I will tell you, Sam Allen called me not long ago, and when he called, it was like a celebrity calling me. I was so excited. I couldn't believe he called me. And it happened to be right after a game where I had some parent issues, and we had lost. We had a really bad, we didn't win a lot of games. Actually, we only won one game this last season. So it was a tough one and a lot of internal strife. And I came home, and I was having a miserable day, and he calls out of the blue, checking up on, some of our Keystone Key 5 coaches. And it made my day. And he listened to everything I had to say. So I've got his number. I'll text it to you because I know he and Chad Sanji is awesome.
yes,
Those guys are unbelievable.
I mean, I don't care. I'll take them all. You know what I mean? Those guys are just awesome, and I love listening to those guys talk. So let's kind of wind down things here. I got 2 questions left for you, but how has coaching basketball changed your life? Like, is there something that's, that has just a pivotal moment with a kid, whatever, a story to tell that you just knew that, basketball has a bigger impact on your life? I know that we as coaches impact kids' lives, but how has the game impacted and changed your life?
The game, I mean, man, the game just models life, and it models personal growth. And when I reflect back on all that basketball has done for me, it's taught me how to persevere. It's taught me how to battle against the odds. It's taught me how to value my teammates and value other coaches in my life. And it's taught me the importance of just introspection, of just kind of looking within myself and being vulnerable, looking at your strengths and weaknesses, and using basketball and then coaching and all that's involved with it to just become a better person and to become the best version of myself. And then when you have the opportunity to sit down predominantly with young men, but I'll reflect on my 10 years coaching golf or coaching volleyball or coaching soccer. When somebody that I've had the opportunity and privilege of coaching comes back and just says, "Hey, I made a life decision because of what you shared with me or how you poured into me, and I'm heading in this direction because I have quite a few young women who golfed for me, and they went to certain colleges and went into different professions just because of the conversations we would have between tee to green, and we would just chat on the golf course. The young men in that Raise Your Game, I coached them in 8th grade. Some of them I coached in youth, and then we're sitting around, and now I have them in class. And these guys come up to me to tell me, "Hey, listen," one of them texted me before we got here. I PR'd in my cross-country match. He wanted to share that with me, which is, it's an honor and privilege for somebody to want to share that with you. I can't think of a specific situation. There's just a large number of situations where just kids come and talk to me because of the relationship that coaching them has established. And so, it's just an incredible opportunity.
All right, Coach. So my last question for you is, you're a middle school coach, and is there any closing remarks that you would like to maybe give those middle school coaches, either advice or even just a coach or fan listening right now, that you would like to share with them before we wrap things up today?
Well, for middle school coaches, never, ever, ever underestimate your importance and your value to the young men and women that you're coaching. I think a lot of times when we oftentimes refer to ourselves as just middle school coaches, and it's more than that. I mean, I even remember when you asked me you wanted to interview me, and like, "Hey, Coach, I'm just a middle school coach," and you're like, "Everyone's got a story," and that was such a great reminder. But man, our role is, we're impacting lives on a daily basis. And coaching, my most favorite quote, Billy Graham, you probably know it: "A coach will impact more lives in the season than most people will in a lifetime." It's the greatest job in the world, coaching these young people. Every kid will remember. And one of the other things that I'm often reminding myself of and becoming better, but our words matter, the good and the bad of what we say. So always kind of, I just kind of remind our younger coaches. I was asked to kind of mentor our 7th grade coach. One of the things that we talk about is just say, when you say things, you got to be careful, because you got to be careful how kids are going to interpret them, because what you say could make or break a kid. And so just kind of keep that in mind. Our job is to love them, coach them, and then prepare them for high school basketball. So it's sometimes it's a thankless job, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. But when those thank yous come in from those kids later on in life, that's what makes it all worth it,
It is, for sure.
Well, that was a great conversation with you, Coach. I really appreciate the time that you've given me today on this podcast. And, if I could ever help you, I know we're many states away and many hours away, but if you ever want to talk X's and O's or what do you do for this, and feel free to reach out to me, and we'll definitely keep in touch over the course of this basketball season. But best luck to you. And again, thank you for being on this podcast, man. I really appreciate it.
Coach Mike, I appreciate the opportunity. I think this is awesome what you're doing, and I can't wait to see how your season goes, man. Your boys are blessed to have you in their lives.
Awesome. Well, take care. God bless, and we'll talk soon, man.
Brother, take care.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Coach Mike on the Mic. Let's Talk Hoops. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure you subscribe and click the notification button, and then share it with your friends. If you're so inclined to do so, would you please rate and review this podcast so that I can help grow this community of listeners? I hope there was something that you heard today that entertained you or connected you to the game of basketball. If you'd like to be a guest or know someone who would be a great guest on the show, please comment below or reach out to me on any of my social media platforms. Until the next time we meet, the ball is now in your court. Be someone's champion today.